working with our lightbox. Right now, without JavaScript or jQuery doing anything, if you click on a picture, it opens up the picture into a new window. Not terribly exciting, but what it means is if the JavaScript fails, the page still works. So with no JavaScript, we can at least see the big pages or big images, but we have to scale back. So the way the lightbox is going to work is that we are going to be able to click on a thumbnail, and it's going to then, instead of going to a new page, it's going to hijack that behavior. It's going to prevent the default behavior from happening. And instead what it's going to do is it's going to then say, I want to now see my big image instead of seeing it go to a new page. And then we'll set up a link, or not a link, but just a click function that if we click on that image, then it goes away. So what we're going to be working on moving to is setting it up so if I click, we get an overlay, so it kind of hides things. We see the picture. If I click anywhere on screen, the picture or the background, it goes away. So that's what we're going to be moving to and figuring out how to do as part of this. But then we have to figure out, well, what happens that those pictures, well, what if I want the pictures to fill my screen? Or what happens if the picture comes up and I have a small screen? Well, that doesn't work terribly well. So how can we make it so that the pictures, the big pictures that come up, are responsive? How can we make it so that the pictures, I have navigation controls so that as I work through them, when I see a picture, I have navigation controls. Currently, the navigation controls don't do anything. So we have to figure out how can we have the navigation controls know what is the next picture, what is the previous picture, how can it work with that? So these are all of the different things that we're going to be trying to deduce on this. What happens if it opens in a browser that is in portrait instead of landscape orientation? Well, already we can see that things are looking kind of ugly. So how do we make this responsive? Do we even care about making it respond to a resize event so that it will readjust itself the moment you're done resizing? It's really easy to listen for that event, especially with jQuery. So if we're doing that, we might as well then make something happen so that we create a much more holistic or responsive result for the end user. So because my comments suck, we will go through and figure out what's in those different files. One thing to be aware of is right now, especially when we go between the first and the second, until we put the controls in, we have all of the CSS that we need. Now, a couple things are happening here. Our overlay is sized to be 100%, so it's sized to fill our screen. So that's important as we go to work with that. And we'll be adding an overlay div in. Now, if you notice, we have a class of overlay and a class of big. Then we have paragraphs. The paragraphs are told to display in line. That's how these different paragraphs, instead of being in a vertical column, now go horizontally across the top of the screen. You're welcome to change that, to modify that as you see fit. Design the page, put in your own artwork, make it look better. Please don't make me stare at pictures of myself. I don't need to see that. Now, currently our document ready is empty, so we're going to have to do something with that as we work on trying to figure out what to do. Now, this overlay, that kind of the gray box that shows over the top, so when I click on a picture we get the gray, which then hides things. We want to add that, so when I click on the button, that overlay shows itself. Now, it's something that as we work with it, we don't need to necessarily create it each time. We could create it each time and work with it, but we also can add it and then use what we learned in previous experiments with jQuery, where we can show and hide things and work with that. So the first thing that I want to do with this is I want to add to my document, I want to add in a div that will be that overlay that's going to cover things. So I am now selecting my slideshow. And I'm going to use jQuery's ability to append. Now we talked about append a little bit last week. It's adding something to the end. Because I want that gray box as it covers, I want it to be at the end of slideshow so it sits on top of these elements. So that's why we say append. And then to add it in, I am going to add in div class equals overlay. So we add this in. So by adding this when the document is ready, if we run this, we can see, whoop, it's slightly problematic because now it's covering up what's on screen. But that was kind of an expected reaction when I previously said, hey, we might want to use jQuery to add it. And then we can tell jQuery that now that I've added it, and let's say it's class, so access it. Now there is only one overlay on the screen, so I probably could use ID with it instead of a class. I mean, that's usually the distinction. If you're only going to ever use something once on your screen, you can assign an ID to it. If you're using it multiple times, it must be a class. Except HTML5 has a little flexibility with that, depending on if the structural elements you're using. But normally an ID only happens once. Classes can happen multiple times. But you could theoretically use classes similar to IDs. They are fairly interchangeable that way. But now if I just type in hide, it goes away. Boom. But it's still there. It's just hiding. So if we pull up our console and look, if we look under elements, under slideshow, we'll see the overlay div has indeed been added to our project. Now that we've added our overlay, we've hidden the overlay, the next thing we want to do is we want to then know when we click on one of the pictures, we don't want it to go to the new page. That's one of the key things that we're working with here is we don't want to actually go to the new page. We don't want the link to open up in it kind of a new page. We want it to stop what it's supposed to do and just do something different. But it should always be designed that when you build a page, if you add in extra functionality using JavaScript, if there's a way to at least provide the functionality when JavaScript is not working right or is disabled, you want to build that into your project. Because if JavaScript is turned off, people can still get to the big pictures. If we didn't have the big pictures as part of the page where it's hard linked into it, people would never be able to get to it if their JavaScript was off or broken or security issues were preventing it from running. So it's always a good practice to try to incorporate that into it whenever possible. So now I want to grab all paragraphs that have the class of pic attached to them. So if we look in our document, we'll see that these paragraphs have the class of pic attached to them. So we're going to go grab those elements and we're going to attach a click function to them. And we're going to reference that click event with the letter E, E for event. So that's a shorthand notation to say the item clicked on. So instead of having to know which picture I clicked on or to make 3 separate click functions, this will take all paragraphs that have the class of pic, and if I click on them, we can now reference the one that was clicked on by the letter E. And the first thing we're doing is we're killing the default link behavior using our prevent default. So prevent default now is going to say, I don't want you to do what you were trying to do, and instead I'll just log out a message. and say, let's just log out E. And let's see what it gives us. So now if I run my page, pull up the console here, hit the picture, we'll see that now it's giving me that information, but no matter what I click on, it's not going anywhere because I've told that link not to do what it was trying to do previously. Now, just to add to it quickly, before we even go grab the big picture, now when I do that, I could just use this and show. So by saying show in there, if I click, we can see how it now makes that overlay pop up. Now that's not very pretty as it came in. And because we are using jQuery, that means we can use our fade ins and fade outs and do cool stuff like that instead of just show. Where fade in is a specialized version. So if I say fade in, and then I can just specify how I want it to be. I'll just start out with slow. Reload it. And we get that, ooh, it's pretty. No. Let's find out. That's not working now. I would have thought, you know, it would, because I do use this a little bit later. Is the room open right now?
This is saying computer.
Oh, okay, because I'm like, it should be logged.
I was going to ask you if I could go grab a pair of headphones, but it's like, wait a second. Students here are lazy sometimes. Let me go check the lab.
And someone probably left it out there, which they did. Perfect. Now this next part is where, in the code I've done before, I use, let's go find out, can I use E or not? Let's try it on this one, because I'm intrigued. No. Interesting. Oh. I see the difference now. Gotcha. All right, so E is the event. E is not the item that was clicked on. The item that was clicked on we will reference again with this, but E is the click event itself. Just like if we have a mouse event, we reference that event, and so with a function, and we're giving that event a name. Because that's logging out the event. If we logged out, this, now we can see we got a very different answer than we got before. Before we got the click event, it gave us a timestamp, it gave us a location, it gave us information about the click event. Now it's telling us the object that was clicked on. Nope. Really? Fine. All right. Now, I apologize if some of this repeats or there's a gap. I forgot to hit the record button and continued, so I'm redoing a section here. So first we get the path for the image. We log that out. And now I am going to construct the markup to add to my document. So with this, we need to create our var, and it'll be my image markup, and it is going to be equal to, and it will be a little bit annoying trying to get all of our different punctuation pieces to line up. But I need to say image source is equal to, and then I'll put a quotation mark, because then I'm going to end that little chunk, and then I will add in my image path variable. And then I will continue with the ending quote that I need. Don't need that. Well, first I need a single quote. Then I need my ending quote. And then with this ending quote, I will then add in a class is equal to big, because I want to put that class on, closing caret, last bracket, and now my semicolon to round it out. Now to confirm it's working, I will log it out. And we'll see how that runs. So pull up my console, log it out. If I click, image source equals, and it's now the path I want to go to. It's all in double quotes. Class equals big, that's in double quotes. So that's all now lining up perfectly. When I'm going to be creating a string with double quotes, then if I use single quotes around it while I'm trying to do it, then it won't freak out about what is my opening and what is my closing quote. If I'm just doing normal things like this line up here on my image path, I could have used double quotes just as easily as single quotes, and it would have behaved and run just fine. It's only when I'm working with a string do I have to be careful of what am I trying to create and what quotes do I need to show up in my actual item. Time has come to make our overlay be able to hide itself when we get rid of it. Actually, before we do getting rid of the overlay, though, we want to be able to add the image to the overlay. And adding the image to the overlay is going to... so we have our image markup of what image we want to add to it. So we're going to add that. And if we just say add the image to the overlay. And we do that by saying overlay, oh, forgot my quotes, overlay dot append image markup. Oh, not dot, sorry. Append is a parenthesis item. Image markup. So that now appends the image markup to it. And then we can fade it in. So now if we look at this, it is not working. And there's an extra line here that's unhappy. So save that, reload, and now we can see it works, but we can't get rid of it. And well, if I was you, I wouldn't want to be looking at this any longer. So again, change your images as soon as you can to images that you enjoy. I don't enjoy these. They were very convenient because you sit on a laptop, you have a webcam, you need pictures, boom, there you go. Now maybe you're a photographer and have lots of pictures in your photo library and you want to use those where you size them all to be an appropriate size and work with it. Great. The image is being added. We add a class of big to it. If you go look up the class of big, you will notice that it's using a cheating method to center it on screen. It's using where it positions itself absolutely, puts the top and left at 50%, and then it does CSS translation to move itself to a negative 50%, so that's a way to actually center an element on screen. So if you ever are looking for techniques of how to do things, that's just one of a gazillion ways to pull up that effect, so now it centers itself in my browser. It's not responsive, so if I have a small screen, I'm kind of screwed at this point. So now I want my images to disappear. If I want the images to disappear, we need to make the overlay go away. And we're able to do that by grabbing the overlay, and we will attach a click function to it. So when doing this whole anonymous function, if you aren't using a code editor with code completion, you will want to make sure you get in your closing elements at the end. I find it's useful to say, to put a little comment after that, where we have this one under end ready. This will be end click of overlay. Now this one down here is our end click of thumbnail image. So adding in that comment helps you, when you're looking at your code, figure out what's going on. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we want to make our overlay fade out. To make the overlay fade out, we need to grab it, and use the fade out method. I'm going to tell it to go out slow. It would be nice if I could just say that's all we need to do, but we probably are going to have some housekeeping as we add additional functionality to this. But the general rule of thumb is anytime you do something, do one step, try it out. That's why we keep using the console statements to log those out before we ever try and use it. Then we do one thing, test it, one thing, test it. Because if I add in multiple lines of code and it breaks, I don't know what broke it. So it's important to just add one at a time. I go here, click, hey, it fades out. If I go here, click, okay, that works. So right now we have everything, it's working. Wait. So it's now working and behaving for me. That's good. But when we start adding in the functionality to be able to click on arrows to move through this as kind of a controllable slideshow as part of the overlay, which is a nice functionality to build into it, we may find that all of those images, as they've been added to the markup, are going to come back and haunt us down the road. So we may have to start disposing of the images. But right now, it's working, so we can leave it. What I will add to this, just as a reminder that I will probably have to do something, I'm going to just add in a callback function. Now this callback function is, and we'll add in an end fade out. This callback function is part of using fade in and fade out, is I can specify the speed, but in the jQuery API it tells me I can also call a function that will be called after this is done. So right now I will just log out console log overlay hidden. Pulls up, click, overlay hidden. All right, so we can see that it's working. Eventually, we're going to have to do a little bit more in this, but that's in the jQuery API under fade out. It tells you, you specify speed, then you can have a function that's called once that animation has been completed. because the images, each time I click, it adds a new one to the mix, we're going to modify it so it gets rid of those images so they don't stay added to overlay. Because now we can see overlay has all of those images. So to get rid of those images, we can just simply say overlay image, sorry, img, the tag. So we say the image tag that's part of overlay, we just want to remove it. So now let's try this. If we look at it, look at our elements, there's overlay, nothing on it. Click here. You can now see overlay has an image on it. Click off. Went away. Click here. Overlay got an image. Click off. Goes away. So we're able to get rid of it without leaving it behind. So that's a tidier house, and that would be a better approach to use when we're working with the code. So that we remove that image that we added during our append statement. So we just remove that tag. And this is, yet again, one of those really cool jQuery methods, remove, which will remove whatever element you have now specified. And if you are jQuery remove, go look it up. It brings you to the jQuery API. So if you're ever wondering what it is, or you think of like a word and you're like, I think this might be something I'm trying to do, type it in jQuery and whatever you're looking for. Pulls up the API and you can see, okay, here's it is. So it removes the class hello. So we can see it removes the item with the class hello, got rid of that div. That's what remove will do. Boom, gone. So it's pretty powerful. And it really gives us a lot of options when we're working with our document. So now we can remove that. Item to be able to notice is this click event for overlay. You will notice it's happening inside the previous click. So it's not like I have a function of click and a separate function of click. They're now contained. This one is contained or created when I click on this paragraph. And it's necessary to do that because otherwise when I try to access this, I may run into a moment of failure because it won't know about the different things that are contained within it. Because if this function is outside of this one, well, it's referencing something that doesn't exist yet. This image tag doesn't exist until I click on this element. So to then say, get rid of it, it'll be like, well, I read your instructions, but it didn't exist, so I'm going to be unhappy with you. So sometimes we will define a function inside a function. And that's okay to do that. That's okay to do that within JavaScript when that function is related to the elements contained within it. Otherwise, what we have to do is we have to then somehow pass information to an external function, which adds an extra complexity. There's some rationale in some kind of uses where you want to do things that way. But in this case, I think that just adds unnecessary complexity by separating it out. So it's going to make sense to keep it here because it's eventually going to have to do more than just get rid of this image. It's going to have to do other housekeeping stuff. So we need to be aware of having it here.